Hi there and welcome to this lecture about Sweden's history from the year 2015 to 2020. My name is Marcus Henriksen and I'm a history teacher here in Sweden. At the beginning of 2015, Prime Minister Stefan Löfven, you can see him here in the picture, said, "My Europe does not build walls." And he was talking about Sweden, that we were a positive force in the world when it come to acceptance and taking in refugees. But later the very same year, Sweden received more than 163,000 people who applied for asylum here in Sweden, mostly from countries like Syria, but also from countries like Afghanistan and Iraq. And this was the highest number of asylum seekers ever recorded in Swedish history. And you can say that Sweden could not handle the pressure. After a couple of months, more and more authorities here in Sweden began to have major problems. This also put a lot of pressure on the housing market and the Swedish school system. In November 2015, the government, which during this time consisted of the Social Democrats and the Green Party, announced that Sweden needing a breathing space and that they would introduce restrictions on the so-called right to asylum. The Swedish Parliament also adopted a new law on December the 21st in 2015. They now made a law about closing the Swedish borders for people who lacked identity documents and passports. In the spring of 2017, the government presented a bill which meant that those who had been rejected but not yet had turned 18 could now have a chance to stay and study here in Sweden. But the proposal received sharp criticism, both because it was not sufficient for the stated purpose and because it was difficult to interpret. Sweden then received a lot of criticism from the refugees, partly from the refugees themselves, but also partly from its own population. When it came to the refugees, we can see that the cost for providing food and accommodation here in Sweden skyrocketed during the years 2015 to 2018. There was also some exploitation of the refugees, including one of sexual nature. Many elderly women here in Sweden took the opportunity to have sex with a bunch of refugees. We can also see major culture clashes here in Sweden during this time. Which law should actually apply? Did the refugees have the information they needed to function in a Swedish society? And when it comes to the subject of deportations, who should actually be sent home? In social media here in Sweden during this time, you could read about people who had been rejected because they lacked like $10 one month, but people who had been molesting others and also raped others could stay. In the year of 2017, Me Too movement started in the United States when actress Alyssa Milano asked all women who had been sexually harassed and raped to reply to a tweet with the words Me Too. This also spread to Sweden. On Sunday, the 22nd of October, several demonstrations were organized and held in Swedish cities. such as Gothenburg, Malmö, Stockholm, etc. The same month, 200 actors also called for Tystnad tagning. They gathered in a demonstration at Södra Teatern in Stockholm with a bunch of anonymous testimonies about such matters as sexual abuse, sexual assault, and rape, and they read them out on the stage. Many more industries did similar things, such as the lawyers here in Sweden, the musicians, the politicians, the journalists, the dancers, teachers, etc. Greta Thunberg became famous here in Sweden in the year 2018. She began by sitting outside the Swedish parliament with a place card reading "School strike for the climate." This action in turn inspired others, mainly young people in several European countries, to carry out similar demonstrations. They gathered under the name School Strike for Climate or Fridays for Future. In December 2018, Times Magazine named Greta one of the world's 25 most influential teenagers. In 2018, we can see a new crisis when it came to Swedish politics. The uncertain election result meant that the Social Democrats here in Sweden formed a so-called transitional government for 135 days. And this is a very unique situation here in Sweden because we never have seen this before in history. But they came to a new kind of political cooperation. In order to stay in power, they created a collaboration consisting of the Left Party, the Center Party, the Liberals, the Green Party, and themselves, that is, the Social Democrats. However, incredibly large concessions were made to both the Center Party and the Liberals. This meant that the right-wing bloc here in Sweden, also known or called the Alliance, broke, and Annie Lööf, who had promised that she would eat her own shoe if she switched sides, did not in fact do so. Between the year 2012 to 2020, the economy here in Sweden did overall well, but how much of this that was due to increased indebtedness is hard to say, and the employment here in Sweden were still high. Then we have the so-called IT scandal here in Sweden. The Swedish Transport Agency accidentally leaked secret information. Stefan Löfven had to reorganize his government, and several people, Anders Ygeman, Anna Johansson, and the Public Health Minister Gabriel Wikström left their positions. Donald Trump then got into a Twitter fight with Greta Thunberg. In 2019, a new virus arrived in the world, COVID-19, and this caused a global pandemic. Symptoms that often distinguish the disease from a common cold or flu are such things as fever, dry cough, and breathing problems. It all started in China, in Wuhan, but how and why are still unclear. The virus then came to South Korea, but also to a various number of European countries. And in the beginning, several countries were hit particularly hard, such as Italy and Spain. Thousands of illnesses and death toll rose rapidly. Many countries tried to stop the spread of the virus or the infection by closing such things as schools, banning large gatherings, keeping distance between people, etc. The first case here in Sweden was confirmed in January 2020 in Jönköping. Since then, the number of infected here in Sweden has also increased, and so has the number of deaths. The government here in Sweden then took action. In Sweden, several official measures were taken, but after a certain time. On March 19, a general advisory was issued against non-essential travel within the country. It was also decided to close secondary schools and to ban gatherings larger than 50 people. The government received some criticism, partly because there was no large extra stock of either medicine, food, or healthcare equipment. Denmark has, Norway has, Finland has, but not Sweden. It was also criticized for taking too weak measures and for taking the measures too late. However, most Swedes were satisfied with how the government handled the crisis and the situation. This is also reflected in the fact that more and more people were voting for the Social Democrats. All over the world, the number of infected people increased, and also the death tolls. Many companies also began to have major financial problems, both here in Sweden, in the US, in Europe, in Asia, etc. Then we have the so-called George Floyd incident. George Floyd, a dark-skinned man, was arrested by American police. But during his arrest he could not get air and breathe, which then led to his death, and everything was filmed and leaked to social media. Huge protests began, first in the US, but then it spread to other countries, also here to Sweden. And there were protests in cities like Stockholm, Gothenburg, Malmö, etc. Most protests were peaceful, but some resulted in violence, both in the United States but also here in Sweden. Many looted houses, shops, etc. They smashed basically everything in their path. They attacked cops, police vehicles, and so on. Many people took a stand, both companies and celebrities, including Netflix, Facebook, and even artists here in Sweden like Sara Larsson, who wanted to remove all policemen. Then people began to take down certain statues, first in the United States, but then also in Europe. Why? People wanted to distance themselves from our previous, more racist history. In Sweden, certain people wanted to take down statues of old kings and scientists such as Carl von Linné. They did some name collections, but Stefan Löfven came out and said that there will be no demolition of statues here in Sweden. So I hope that you during this short lecture have learned something new about Sweden's history during the years 2015 to 2020. The sources I have used for this video are Perspective on History by Lars Hansen Örjan Nyström, History by Elisabeth Ivansson and Mattias Tordai, Social Science by Ulla M. Andersson, Per Evert and Jurel Hedengren, a documentary, Wikipedia MeToo, Wikipedia Greta Thunberg, Wikipedia Coronavirus, Worldometers Coronavirus, Crisisinformation.se, Aftonbladet, and some videos on YouTube. But if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment sections below. You can also send me an email and I will try to answer as best as I can. Hope you have a great day. Bye.